Hey, good evening, guys. Welcome from the great state of Pennsylvania, the home office here in Happy Valley. And we're going to spend some time in chapter 12 tonight from the Whiteout in Happy Valley. So I'm going to pull up chapter 12 and we're going to spend some time basically with three ideas in leadership that I think have really good relevance for us as believers and ultimately leaders and managers. The transformational, the servant, uh, and the authentic leadership models, which I think have really great gospel driven, redemptive value as opposed to just someone in leadership that's leading a corporation, leading a company, leading a division or a group of people, and doing it just for the outcomes that are typical in business, maybe the bottom line or building the business or whatever. And in this sense, I think these key in very much into relationships and building into the lives of people, and ultimately for the cause of Christ and for the kingdom. So these are the three that we're going to hone in on. I'm going to try to keep this to about 10 minutes. I've got a timer set for 11, and hopefully we'll get through this quickly yet efficiently. So we'll see how this goes here. Just want to first hit on the first big one is, I'm going to move my image over there. Transformational versus transactional. The first notion is transformational, which is the idea of leadership that I'm building into the lives of people. I'm mentoring the people that I'm managing and leading. It's allowing me to motivate them in a way that's bigger than just my own personal gain as the leader or as the manager. Transactional, in contrast to that, would be just the opposite, kind of this quid pro quo, that you do something for me and I will do something for you, literally a transaction. You see this a lot in athletics and in sports where coaches are literally using athletes for their own personal gain, for their own building their reputation, for winning contests and those types of things. And so their athletes are kind of a means to that end. And so those are transactional. And I think if you think through your life, those of you that were athletes or are athletes, the types of coaches that you have, I would suspect that you've had way more transactional coaches than transformational coaches. And transformational would be those types that you can look back and say, these were people that really invested in me and believed in me and really made a huge difference in my life, even beyond the game that they were coaching. So as we think through this, transactional kind of has two categories as you think about it. Kind of that, again, the quid pro quo contingent reward. So if you do something for me, then I will do something for you. A lot of times parents will, in a micro sense, do this with their children. It's like, all right, if you clean your room, I will allow you to play on the Xbox or something like that. So it's kind of an if then. If you do this, I will do that, kind of contingent reward. And then the second one is management by exception, which is actively when I think I used the example with you guys, the Rainbow Grill manager. It's you're actively looking for things that people are doing wrong or that needs to be fixed and so forth, and you kind of manage transactionally in that way. Or in a passive sense, you could do it, you kind of sit back and you wait for people to make the mistakes and then you kind of jump on them when they do. And those are kind of typical of a transactional leader. In contrast, and I've got four I's that are going to typify someone who's more transformational, and they'll all obviously start with the letter I, but idealized influence, someone who's a great role model. There's someone that you would want to pattern yourself after. You might want to emulate as someone impressive to follow. Or to imitate in the way that they conduct themselves. And they want to get other people to buy into or build into the vision that they have. So this idea that I'm not overseeing you to be in charge of you, but I want to influence you. Secondly, they want to be inspirational. They want to be motivational, and they communicate high expectations, but yet do it in a way that inspires people rather than, kind of a beat down. You will do this. The beatings will continue until morale improves is not the model that you might see in this one. And your appeal is other centered, rather than your own self-interest. You want to see them be able to achieve and do great things in the job and the tasks that they have. So idealized influence, inspirational motivation. Third one is intellectual stimulation. And again, you want to pique the interest of the people. You want to grow the people. You want them to grow, not just as individuals, but also in the ability to do their job well. And ultimately, one of the greatest compliments I know in the world of coaching, assistant coaches that ultimately get head coaching jobs, that's kind of the goal. And guys like Coach K at Duke and Tom Izzo, one of their feathers in their cap is to see how many of their former assistants go on to be head coaches. So ultimately, you want to grow and develop intellectually the people that you're leading. And then the last one is just individualized consideration, just this idea that you don't operate corporately, where people are numbers and they don't have relevance to you as individuals. You want to listen carefully to them. You want to treat them individually, and they need to know that you're very much vested in them as individuals and in their success. And so that's kind of the transformational model. The second one is servant leadership. And this one was referenced several times in some of the management interviews that you guys did. And it was encouraging to hear that. But it's kind of this paradoxical notion that I can lead, but I can also do that through serving you. And so the paradigm of the leadership model kind of gets turned upside down. Instead of the top of the food chain being at the top of the pyramid, you flip it and they are at the bottom of the pyramid, and their only objective is to serve the people that they are leading. And so it puts others and the followers first. A quote I found, and I've not read this book, but really liked it. Organizations exist to serve, period. And leaders live to serve, period. Just straight up, we are here to serve. And when you're in leadership roles and management roles, that's ultimately your primary responsibility. And I'm not going to read this verbatim, but the part that I liked is to make sure that everybody else's, the people that you're leading, their priorities have become your priorities, and your success is their success. And the best test of this is that at the end here, the last statement says, and the effect on the least privileged in society, will they benefit, or at least will they not be further deprived because you have been the person in their life that has been serving them and their needs, and ultimately replicate that in themselves being servants as well. I'm not going to read through all of these, but I have 10 characteristics of servant leaders. I'm going to just highlight 3 of them that I think are really important. Number 1 is listening and acknowledging the viewpoint of others and following those perspectives. Servant leaders are really good listeners, and that's something that can be challenging at times. And earlier in our course, we did, I had you watch a TED Talk by Cindy Headley about being active listeners and how you can be good listeners. And that's an important component of being a servant leader. The second one I want to highlight is empathy. That whole notion of walking a mile in someone else's shoes or standing in someone else's shoes so you can truly understand what it means to be them. And we often have a hard time doing this, I think, in general, because we only know our own experiences, and we tend to view life through our own perspective, our own lens, our own worldview. That is something that Keller has talked significantly about, that we come into all situations with a bias, and in this case, our own personal experiential bias. And so empathy is a really strong characteristic of a servant leader. And then the last one, someone who's just really committed to building community, building team, and has the ability to bring people together rather than polarizing and pushing people away from them, is a really key component of being a servant leader. And the third one that I want to talk specifically about, we've hit transformational, we've hit servant leader, and the last one is being an authentic leader. And you've probably heard me say these quotes at some point somewhere along the line, but relationships are built on trust. and you also can't lead where you haven't been. And I think being authentic with the people that you've been called to manage and to lead is really an important aspect of leadership. And there's kind of 5 characteristics, and I'm going to show you here in a minute a visual that kind of spells this out as well. But you understand the purpose of the people that you've called to lead. You have a purpose and you understand it. You're marked by strong values, trusting relationships, self-discipline, and you act from the heart, which really drives the mission of your organization and you personally. I would encourage each of you to think through not just an organizational mission statement, but a personal mission statement as well, and particularly as it relates to being authentic. We're going to watch this. It's a really short video, real quick, on Bill George, and then we're going to just talk briefly about it.
You say that you have to do a certain kind of inner work to find your true north, to be an authentic leader. What is that inner work, and where does it lead?
What I've been wrestling with, and you know a lot more about this than I do, how do you gain self-awareness? And I guess I feel, since I'm not a monk, I feel like in living in a cave, you have to have real world experience. I think you have to have a way to process that experience internally. Call it reflection, introspection. I have to meditate regularly. Some people like to pray. Some people have an intimate person, a spouse, or someone with whom therapist, they can share everything. But you got to have some way to process that. Just having experiences doesn't do it, because you'll repeat the same mistakes you made and just find the stakes get bigger and bigger. But third, I think you have a way to process it through feedback, honest feedback with other people that you trust, not feedback from people you don't trust. And having a group of people with whom you can share at an intimate level, not at a superficial level. So many of our societal our interactions are superficial today. They don't allow us to be truly authentic.
So that little clip there from Bill George, really interesting. He hit on 3 points, and I've kind of spelled them out here. But as you think about authenticity, really kind of 3 bullet points that he hit on. It requires having real world experience, and ultimately you can share your experience and your stories with others, and that's a great mark of authenticity. Secondly, you need to be able to process that experience in some way through some type of reflective activity. And he says he meditates. As believers, certainly we can meditate on scripture and meditate just kind of on our own experiences and so forth. Prayer is a way to do that as well. And then ultimately moving into that third one, to be have people in your life that you can get honest feedback from relative to your authenticity, your ability to lead in an authentic way. And so just have some questions here that I would encourage you to kind of think through as well. Who are those type of people that would be in my life that will give me honest feedback? And that's an important piece to being authentic. You have to be able to hear and receive feedback, and you need to be reflective, and thus you can see a lot of the activities, even in this chapter, are reflective activities, just to kind of step back and to think about, all right, how do I do this as an individual, as a leader, as a manager, and so forth. So moving on from here, this is kind of that photo that I referenced that I think ties into being authentic. And these all correspond, this graphic, they all correspond to those 5 characteristics of authentic leaders. But, and we'll start right here with purpose. As you really understand and know your purpose well, it's going to lead ultimately to your passion within your work. As you understand your values, that's going to greatly impact your behavior. You heard that in the onion model going back several weeks now, as we talked about organizational culture. Relationships, as you live into relationships, it's going to increase your connectedness as an authentic leader. Self-discipline is going to lead to consistency. And as you truly understand your own heart and your passions that are within your heart, that's going to lead to compassion as an authentic leader. And so a great little graphic there helping us really kind of understanding the 5 big pieces to authentic leadership. And then lastly, and we're going to wrap this up. But critical life events really have a great influence on our ability to be authentic, and not just. And this goes back to even the video that we saw from Bill George. But things that happen in our life, both good and bad, ultimately have the capability and the opportunity for us to be authentic as we share those and as we live into those experiences with the people that we're leading and managing. And your story can be a really powerful tool to show your authenticity, to be authentic. And we won't take the time here, but I would love to tell you some of the stories in my life and things that have really had a huge impact in who I am and the way that I lead and the way that I just operate in life. And those stories, those events in our past have a really powerful tool in terms of being authentic. And I'll close with this. I think there's maybe one more slide, but this image is called Sankofa, and it's kind of a cool image. It goes back to an African kind of proverb, if you will. You have this picture of this bird facing forward, but looking backwards. And kind of the idea is that as we move forward and we go through life, we need to make sure that we take the time to reflect and look back on, the journey that we've been on as we see God's faithfulness in our life and so forth. And those are opportunities to be able to be open, transparent, authentic with the people that we're leading, and that will allow us to build the strong relationships with the people that we lead. And if you want to take the time, this is kind of a cool story. If you remember, a few years back, there were shootings in Ferguson, Missouri, relative to police officers, and a really cool story. And we're not going to take the time to do it, but that really showed some significant authentic leadership. So that's kind of wrapping up that whole notion and idea of leadership in chapter 12, and the ones that we really wanted to kind of focus on: transformational, authentic, and servant leadership. All right. Hey, take care.